to Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, a conversation circle. I'm Renee Tillotson. Each week here we draw from the topic of the week in the Still and Moving Center Almanac. And our theme for the entire year is Citizens of the Future. This week, we take up the topic of bridge builders, who are the kind of people that we need a lot of amongst us for citizens of the future. These people build bridges between divergent people and places, between ideologies, political perspectives, between science and religion, between conservation and progress, bridging us from yesterday into tomorrow. We have a really, I would say, illustrious speaker who's going to address us soon and to kind of get us ready for the idea of bridge building. I do want to introduce Roger Epstein, our speaker, who's generously agreed to speak with us from the Hermetic tradition, using analogy and correspondence to approach our topic of bridge builders. Roger has given consideration to a symbol article in the journal called Hermes, and that article is called The Bridge, which approaches the symbolism of the bridge from just about every angle that you can imagine, from the mythic to the poetic to the architectural and the cultural. Roger is an attorney who formed the Joseph Campbell Foundation for the widow of the preeminent world mythologist, Joseph Campbell. Roger served as the foundation's director for 30 years. As the creator of a huge multicultural event in Honolulu called The Voyage of Aloha, and as founder of Hawaii's Forgiveness Project, and as a business and cultural liaison with China. Roger is one of the most prolific bridge builders that I know, even if he has never stepped foot on a bridge construction site. So Roger, take it away if you would. Bridge us over.
Okay. Let's see if we can right the ship here. So as Renee said, this article talks about the metaphor of ancient bridge building. Bridges that in the ancient times were said to bridge heaven and earth in the Nordic tradition, and the warriors crossed over from into Valhalla, and in many other ancient traditions, bridges between the gods and the earth to allow passage of the brave, and also communications between the gods and we earthlings. In Chinese mythology, gods descended to earth on the floating bridge of heaven. And in Japanese, it was ascending to heaven on the Buddhist bridge, Yatsu Hashi. Other bridges in the ancient world and in our mystic tradition, the Zoroastrians and Magians had a called Chinavar, the bridge of the separator. And it was between life and death. As you died, you would go over the bridge, and there would be an account of your actions. And if it was good, if you were good and lived a good life, you'd continue over the bridge. And if you didn't, you'd fall into the abyss. A similar abyss was in Dante's Inferno, where the wooded bridge was over a fiery river. And if you weren't a good person, you could fall in again. In the Catholic tradition, bridge is, if you use the word pont, the French word, or several other Latin languages, Pontifex Maximus was a title given to the Pope because he was a bridge leading to salvation. And also the importance of the bridge in a violin, which links the strings to carry the vibrations over to the rest of the instrument. And so we go from there, this idea of a bridge to cross over to heaven and earth, to life and death, over and get over to the Hades. There's also this idea of a bridge between ideas. And that how do you, if you see a bridge between ideas in your own mind, how does that look? And this nice article talks about how the arches press outward against the abutments. And so there's a pressure on you. You've got to be strong enough to hold on to your ideas. And you can leap forward in your thinking by pushing against the foundations that you've set up in your present knowledge. And you've got to secure that present knowledge. You've got to be on a solid foundation, or the bridge will wash away with the currents, and similarly engulf your mind if you're not properly set up. Interestingly, in building a bridge with cantilevers and suspension bridges, you start out with some false work. You put up some support beams to be there to put up the permanent ones, and temporary links that they call sky hooks. And so then the question is, what happens if we get started on those links down the road from our present knowledge to our future thinking, and we suddenly get lost thinking that the false work is really the answer? And so the bridge is a metaphor to thinking about how you create these ideas in your mind. And you have to be careful because you make a lot of false starts and you want to get to the right answer at the end. You shouldn't get lost in the false work. You have to abandon these initial ideas perhaps and be open to coming to the real conclusion of the truth. Joseph Campbell's work is also interesting in the concept of bridges. And he talks about the hero's journey, which is going from getting a call to do something and then saying, oh, I'm not good enough. And then you eventually accept the call if you want your life to move along. And then as you move on the path and you accept the call, you go through some dangerous portal, which is often a bridge, perhaps guarded by someone who you have to give the right answer to, or you have to kill in order to move forward. And so the idea, the element of danger in making this trip, both in building the bridge, but also in building the bridge, bridging these ideas in your mind to come up with the truth, and evolving mankind is the talk for, the theme for our year. How do you overcome your fear of getting started, and perhaps the stakes are really high, and you want to accomplish something, but you have to get past your fear, and so you do it because of your goal, because this is what you want to do. In some of the ancient myths, Sir Gawain bridged an underwater torrent of water to rescue a maiden. This is always in the mystical stories, we're rescuing maidens, but perhaps the maiden is a whole new outlook on life. The maiden is something that's fresh and new. And again, we have to go over the bridges to get there. There's a story of Ramayana, where Hanuman, the monkey king, vows to Rama to build of himself and more monkeys a bridge to rescue the queen. And so again, another move towards gaining this wisdom and moving on. Also, looking at the bridge as perhaps a bridge between your lower nature and your higher nature. And, the bridge is really considered a turning point. Can you get past the bridge? Can you go from your greed and desire and fears and anger to get to your better angels? And so we've got to get prepared to do this. And to do that, we got to become aware of every detail of our own nature, and set up this bridge, set up these basic foundations so we can get to the other side. And sometimes that's a very difficult job. Interestingly, the video that Renee was going to show, there's a really interesting metaphor or example in here about the first person to build a bridge over chasms in some ancient societies. You would shoot an arrow across the chasm and with a rope tied to it, and then you could shoot more and eventually build this bridge. But somebody had to be the first one to go across it. Someone had to go down and go walk across the chasm to get to the other side, so that the bridge could be completed. So there's this element of danger, an element of preparation, and also we look at this as going back and forth over the bridge once it's completed. So you start from your lower nature. You start from being so self-concerned that all you can think about is taking care of yourself. But once you build this bridge, now you can reach your higher self, and you can take people back and forth, and you can help them get from their lower selves to their higher selves. So we could think of a bridge as perhaps a subtle inner instrument in this context, thinking about how we build a bridge in ourselves, how we get out of our own self-conscious, link ourselves to higher worlds, gather the virtues at the bridge, recognize what our passion is, how do we want to get there, sacrificing our personal self, and thus wiping out those things that are keeping us from going forward, and creating a path so we can go back and forth, and we can also bring others over. So what about what we're talking about, kind of building a bridge to bring people together? Building a bridge perhaps to create our current situation is a fantastic example, really. Half of our country is blue and half is red, and the ideas of each seem insurmountable. How can you possibly accept or be on one side of the bridge and yet want to communicate with, want to build a bridge so that we can really recognize and come together and have a country that's working instead of stalled? So the first point is to build a bridge in yourself. If we want to change our nature, if we want to get ourselves to a point where we can bridge the gap between people whose ideas seem so disparate, first we have to work on ourselves. We've got to get to a place where we feel that, we're ready to go forward. And here's a great poem I found from ancient Chinese. It's called the Faith Mind poem. And I'll read part of it. The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. When love and hate are both absent, everything becomes clear and undisguised. Make the smallest distinction, however, and heaven and earth are set infinitely apart. If you wish to see the truth, then hold no opinions for or against anything. To set what you like against what you dislike is the dis-ease of the mind. And I also think that ties in greatly with a way I've come to look at the first story in the Bible, Adam and Eve. And so Adam and Eve are in the garden where you have everything, you're happy, you've got all your needs met, you're comfortable with life. What is that? You might call it, in a Buddhist context, enlightenment. Adam and Eve were enlightened and they were happy with what they had. But they ate an apple from the tree, not the tree of knowledge, but the knowledge of good and evil. And so coming from that place of judgment, this is good, this is bad. It's not following the Tao. It's determining what we think as humans are good and bad. And if we let that go, we reach a point of enlightenment. But when we are attached to the judgment, when we learn of the judgment or come from that place, then we don't build the bridge. We're not getting ourselves ready because we're not open to the other group's information. I like the Hawaiian ho'oponopono in this context too, which is ho'o, of course, is to make. And ho'oponopono is to make things pono, to make things right. And what ho'opono is to make things right. What's ho'oponopono? It's to make things right again. So when we did the forgiveness project, we were told by our wonderful kumu that there really is nothing to forgive in the Hawaiian tradition because it was right the first time. You made it right, but now we have better facts, we make it right again. So it gets back to this sense of accepting what's happened right now. We don't judge it because it happened. And as Jerry Jampolsky used to say, give up all hope for a better past. We can't change what happened, and no matter how much we ruminate on it. And so Hawaii being a terrific place to bridge East and West, a great place for interfaith healing, we probably are living in a place with more better living, a multi-ethnic community than any other place in the world. How do we bring these ideas of the bridge to building our own bridges within ourselves, and then bridging our community, bridging our differences, and bridging the East-West? And so that's what I put out for discussion, Renee.
Thank you so much. Those of you who noticed in your invitation to this talk saw a few passages, a few paragraphs from the article, The Bridge, that Roger was largely referencing. That entire article is something that I could also give you a link to if anybody would like to look into that further. It's quite a dense article, and I really want to applaud you to begin with, Roger, for bringing out so many really salient features that I feel like we could understand well. I was particularly caught by your mentioning of the bridge within us between our lower and our higher nature. And there's something in the language of Sanskrit called the antaskarana, and that is the bridge between the higher and lower self. And I think the purpose, which you probably recognize as well, Roger, and just remembering that this is a conversational circle, All of us can make comments and ask questions, and all of us can answer questions and make more comments. This idea of bridging the higher and lower self, I think, is not simply so that we can go from our lower self to our higher self, but also so that we can come back through our lower self and turn it to good purpose. So if my lower self includes my personality that I have because I'm living in a body, just like when Elizabeth was talking a couple weeks ago about this piano keyboard between states of matter and states of higher consciousness or spirit. And while we're in the body, it's only at that time that we can play all the way up and down the whole keyboard. I think this idea of the Antaskarna bridge between our higher and lower natures is the idea that our higher, more noble aspect of ourselves, like you're talking about, Roger, that more compassionate and side of ourselves, that wiser side of ourselves, has to make use of these personalities, of these bodies that we're in order to do our good works in the world. I mean, just something as simple as looking at one another in the eyes, as offering a smile. We can connect with somebody else through our physical being in ways that are really meaningful. And so we don't just like make a bridge and go up into our higher self and stay up there and float around. We also have to be able to take that wisdom that we gain, touching into that deeper part of ourselves, back into the world. And maybe that's when, I'm wondering if you think that's when we can make the best connections with others. It's like we take all those difficult experiences that we've had as in bodies and as personalities, all those struggles that we've gone through, and then we're able to connect with other people who have gone through similar kind of problems and struggles in their personal lives and make these connections.
Yeah, I think that's really true, Renee. That's really well said. And that's the concept of the bridge. It's not just a one way, it's back and forth. And in the hero's journey, once you accomplish the boon, the last step was to bring it back to help the community. And so that's another aspect of it. But certainly we're people, we may be spiritual people having a human experience, but we are having a human experience, and we do bring ourselves to that. And it's not just lower and upper, it's all the keys in the keyboard in the middle too. And so if we don't come with our humanity as well as our wisdom, we're not going to connect with people. And at the same time, we want to be careful that we're not bringing our judgment with us, in which case you lose the connection. You have to be open. My experience, you have to be open to the other person, and you have to be mostly focused on what it is they need and what it is that they're telling you in order to accomplish this connection, which then helps them to connect, and on and on and on. We're all, the article mentioned that the person who developed the suspension bridge was first looking at a spider web, and that's how they saw the connections. And I think we build these bridges, and then the next person learns and they build a bridge, and at some point we're all connected, which is where we want to be if we're talking about the future of mankind, humankind.
I've been thinking as you were talking about the nature of the bridge. I mean, you quoted Seng Chao, who's not just a Chinese poet, he's the third Chinese patriarch of Zen. The great way is not difficult. It merely precludes picking and choosing. That element, you called it later judgment. It strikes me that there's a very subtle thing going on here with a bridge, which is that we are not crossing the bridge to get somewhere else. In other words, the destination is not heaven, paradise, the pure land, the place where everything is going to be okay, which is not where we are right now. You know, how do we get from this Civil War-like situation to a sense of peace? And that will trap us. The bridge, in such an interesting way, is already spanning there, and we walk on the bridge step by step by step, getting nowhere, coming from nowhere, and no one is walking. That there's something there, I think, that removes the element of trying to change the way the things are. I'm not real clear in my mind, but as you were talking about this, I kept thinking of a parable that Franz Kafka gives of a bridge who tries to look at himself. And once the bridge tries to look, it turns around and obviously everything falls down. The bridge has to just span between the two. It can't, sort of be going from place to place.
That's really interesting, the way you say that. And let's look at it. Let's look at it from this standpoint in terms of all of us being connected to the universal energy, and thinking about it's almost an arrogant way I'm proposing. I'm building the bridge so that I can connect with this other person. The bridge, as you say, is there. It's there. All we have to do, perhaps, is take some steps to go forward. And the way to move forward is to not be judgmental of the people on the other side, to not already decide that your purpose is to convince them. It's to connect with them. The bridge is a connector. You don't necessarily have to change their mind, but maybe you look for points of connection. Why are they on the bridge? We both agreed to get on the bridge. Or one of us agreed to walk over to stay on the other person's side. So maybe that's a nice way to think about it. The bridges are there if we just take advantage of them. Does that speak to what you were saying?
Well, and last time, I forget, I think it might have been Renee, but someone talked about Indra's net. And every, interstice of the net reflects every other one. So we're already connected. We are interpenetrating everything right now. So that's kind of, that's the gist of it in a sense. It's a we moving as opposed
and
to
the other thing is that's why it hurts so much when they don't agree with us. It is like that violin, the strings, I'm pulling on one side of the string and you're pulling on the other, and there's a discordance, and we got to get the bridge in there to make the flow better.
I believe it was Elizabeth, Bob, who was mentioning Indra's net, at least Elizabeth. There may have been someone else as well. Elizabeth, did you want to make a comment on that or some other point?
Thank you. Boy, I took notes, Roger, and so many things came up. The most recent of which was the concept of the Native Americans saying, learning to walk in someone else's moccasins. And every day I walk with the same person because we both had hip replacements and we need the exercise together. And he's opposite me on the political spectrum. So I intentionally maintain this friendship in order to discern the differences between us without judging them. And I think it's really, really important, because when you talk about giving up all judgment and everything is okay, then how do you know what you want to bridge? Like what's the difference between the blue and the red? So it's terribly important to recognize that as we give up judgment, we don't give up discernment, because discernment is free of judgment. It just shows you clearly what the two sides you're working to bridge are, for example. And obviously we know that things are unsustainable in our current world, and we'd like to have a world in which there's much more humanity and love and caring and sharing than there is in our current world that's in such deep crises. So we have to discern those things in order to choose our path. My life's mission really is, you made me aware of this, that I'm bridging the past with the future in the sense of having discovered this maturity, this maturation cycle in evolution, and seeing that humans are now in this adolescent crisis, and that we're trying to bridge the childhood with the mature version, as we expect every feisty teenager to grow up and become a mature citizen. But you don't kill off your teenagers, you don't judge them, put them all in jail if you want mature citizens, right? So you have to discern that there is a juvenile phase and a mature phase, and then work toward in positive ways, without warfare, without it. We don't want warfare, we want to get to that maturity in a cooperative way. So all these things about walking in other people's moccasins to see why are they thinking this way, and how interesting, and what can I learn from that? And then, of course, just lastly, I think I said this before, in nature is profoundly conservative with things that work well and radically creative with things that don't work. And that's really what our blue-red dichotomy should be about, and so that you don't vote every 4 years on doing either the radical stuff or the conservative stuff, but you recognize the partnership. That's the most important bridge I think we need to be working on now, and many of us are, is to see that the blue and the red are equally important, but they can both go astray from their basic commitments. And we need to discern that as well. We need to discern our own shadow as we, try to reach our higher self. We have to be aware of that. And oh, by the way, on the keyboard that you brought up, Renee, what crossed my mind was, wouldn't it be crazy if you could only play music upward on a keyboard, or only could play music downward on a keyboard? It wouldn't last very long, because you'd get to one end or the other, and then you couldn't do anything else. So again, the keyboard seems useful, because obviously the music is richest when it contains both the bass and the treble, right? Both this physical and the higher self that we have to ground down to our physical toes, that cosmic love. So I don't want to waffle on here, but Roger, you inspired me to a lot of thinking here.
Mary, were you inspired with any particular thoughts as folks were talking?
Yes, it certainly stretches my ability to see who I can agree with, and then the ones that I don't agree with, is it a problem? I know sometimes I just say, okay, you've got your ideas, I got mine, see ya. And if that's in the family, that's a lot harder to do. So it certainly does take discernment. I love discernment, and a lot of prayer, because, we can't change anybody else's mind but our own. Amen.
And that's what I was going to say, Mary. No matter what the differences are, Mary always seems to be crossing them with prayer.
When Mary was talking, I was also wondering, we talked about Ho'oponopono, but I wonder if the idea of Pu'uanua, the city of refuge, is an interesting metaphor of finding a place where we're not separated or we're safe.
In terms of bridging connections, it would be nice if we could get somewhere safe, because, if you didn't get to the Pu'uhonua, you were killed. So that's an interesting thought if we're trying to build a society where we don't take Mary's choice of putting our shell on when we can't agree with someone, or letting the other side kill us. Maybe we do have to find a place of refuge. Renee, maybe one of the answers is to think of it as, hey, let's take a break. we've had this conversation, we're not getting anywhere, and let's lighten up. Let's take a break, count to 10, or come back in a few days, or just leave that part alone and look for where we connect. That's another aspect, I think, of this in building bridges. It's when you look at the blue and the red and you see all the differences. I mean, how many people do you know who fundamentally don't want to have a good life, don't want to have a family or a job and make a living and raise your kids and see a good society? You may have a different idea what it is, but the fundamental concepts are there. So maybe a place of refuge is to go towards where your commonalities are and step back from the differences, or maybe it's to take a break.
David?
Thank you, Roger, for a great introductory talk. Something you were mentioning about having the foundation first before you can build the bridge reminded me of the bridge pose of yoga. Even at the outset of all of this, the word yoga means to unite or to yoke or to bridge, right? And it's the symbolic meaning behind the pose is that it bridges the world of the mundane and material to the world of the divine, separated by the river of life. But the bridge pose anatomically is interesting because it requires all that strength from the backside, right? So it strengthens your back and your glutes in order to lift up into the bridge, which then subsequently, of course, opens your heart. It brings the head and the heart into alignment, for one thing, and you're arching over, the heart is wide open. And so the feet are pressing down, and it's all this downward pressure through the feet and down through the back that actually lifts and opens the heart. And I was thinking too that the whole notion at the highest level of yoga is that the truth is there is just one. So in the world of the mundane, we have red and blue, or this side of the river and that side of the river. But the truth is, there is no difference. So when Elizabeth was talking about meeting with the other person from the other side, the more they talk, the more they discover the similarities rather than the differences. And you carry that to the end point, and you eventually arrive at the divine, at the oneness. And I just also want to thank you for the Jerry Jampolsky quote. But I just, if I could just for a moment, you said the tree of knowledge that they ate from, where they got the apple from, it was the tree of right and wrong. Did I hear that correctly?
No, the knowledge of good and evil.
Good and evil. Okay, so knowledge comes from, or good and evil comes from knowledge, or?
I think you could have a lot of knowledge. It doesn't have to be good and evil. I mean, you could have a knowledge that a tree grows. You could have a knowledge, that it's raining. But the knowledge of good and evil, it has to be a judgment call or discernment in a better phase. So it's not just the knowledge. That's why I pointed that out, David, because a lot of people say, oh, ate from the tree of knowledge, but that's not the apple. The apple was the knowledge of good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
I think for myself, my understanding is that when we reach the human phase, we are in a position of discernment, and we can determine whether the choices that we make are selfish, self-centered, or on behalf of the whole. In a way that creatures that are not functioning at the same level of consciousness as the human consciousness, if a tiger kills another animal, there's no need to determine, was this a righteous act? Was this an unrighteous act? Was this selfish? Was this not? That's not really relevant in the world below the human kingdom. But when a human being takes another life, there has to be real discernment there. And we alone, it seems, maybe some of the higher mammals are getting close to that level, but we as humans certainly have the responsibility to make those determinations as to whether or not the thoughts and the words and the deeds that we choose to make, and I really use that word choose very carefully, do serve a higher purpose, or if they're simply selfish. So to me, that's what that knowledge of good and evil, that's what that implies to me. Samantha, did you have thoughts on that or another topic of this bridge builders idea?
Yeah, thank you so much, Renee, and for Roger, of course, for the presentation, and others as well. This has been a wonderful conversation to be a part of, especially for my first one. I'm new to Still and Moving Center. As of today, I just serendipitously came across it, and Kevin so generously extended the invitation. So I'm sitting in gratitude for the serendipity that's presented me the opportunity to be with you today. But I was mostly ruminating, Roger, on the Chinese poem that you mentioned. I believe you said it was like the Faith in Mind poem about one of the lines, if you wish to seek the truth, or if you seek the truth, hold no opinions. And it was also serendipitous that I was having a conversation with a friend last night about kind of the cultural emphasis and pushing towards the opinionation of societies that I think is so common amongst, of course, the political specters in society, but beyond that as well, right? We're so pushed, and as somebody who identifies as a young person, I see it all around me, right? What is your opinion politically, religiously, on things such as, did you have a good experience or a bad experience at a restaurant? Like, you must share that opinion on everything, right? And perhaps this is something that is experienced in a silo here, and others might not relate, but as I'm able to make space for more discernment, Elizabeth, I love that word. I'm able to see that as we move towards the truth, that is oftentimes the farthest from any opinions, right? The farthest from judgment and all of that. And I think it is the mark of an educated society and a mature society to move farther away from opinionated and snap judgments of things. So I work a lot with young people. I work in foresight and in futures and in bridging generational gaps. So the bridge theme feels also very lucky for me to be a part of this conversation today. And I'm working with some of Hawaii's youth to kind of envision the future that they want. And I've, in conversation with them, found that so much of this idea of like having to hold an opinion of needing to take a stance or a side on something is so it's just not intuitive, right? It's something that is learned, and something that is there's a feeling of pressure upon them to take a side, take a stance, versus just this kind of overwhelming knowing of the truth. And that's something that is harmonious and civil and equitable and done as a collaborative effort. And so anyway, I'm just thinking all about how opinions can oftentimes be forces for good, but I feel like more often than not are divisive and corrosive to society. And I think our young people know that intrinsically, and yet we're telling them differently. This is all of these resources that we've discussed today, I will definitely be taking back to conversation with some of those beautiful people soon. So thank you for all of your insights. I'm saving all the links and all of the references as you note them.
Wonderful. No, we're so glad you're joining us and sharing with us, and also with the youth. You're in a great position to be a bridge builder, it seems. Diana, I saw your hand up.
I've been thinking about the idea. I love this idea of bridge. And when I believe we are all one, and that we do need discriminating wisdom. Now, when I work with couples, I say any couple can make it if both are willing to own their own responsibility and really want to bridge the gate. That one person wanting to bridge the gate, if the other person's not willing to communicate or talk, we can active listen, we can be present, but it's really hard to bridge that gate. So that's when I think Ho'oponopono or prayers are just sitting in our own oneness and our own love and sending that to the world is really important, because many people on both sides are unwilling to communicate or unwilling to really say, we want to bridge this gate. They don't want to. And so how do we, if we want to, we can be with people that have diametrically opposed opinions. And I talk about it's whether it be religion, whether it be politics, we can be with them. But if the conversation is so black and white, then what we do is we're with them as humans, and maybe we don't discuss a lot of the political or the religious beliefs until it feels safe for both, or both are willing to listen. And again, we can active listen, but I really think that idea of prayer and really doing our own work and sending out Ho'oponopono is really important, because not if they're both not willing to want to come together in love and really work on a connection, but they're really both staunch, all we can do is pray and be in our oneness and love and send that to the world, because I think it makes a difference.
I am very aware of the breadth and depth of the article that I asked him to speak upon. It's something I had read quite a few years earlier. And then when I went and read it again myself, I went, oh my gosh, I really asked Roger to dive into something really deep. And so what he was able to pull from that article gave so much relevance, I think, to this topic of the bridge, and then showed us how we could use the idea of the bridge to be bridge builders ourselves. So I really thought it was quite masterful of you, Roger, and I want to just thank you and applaud you so much for what you're able to share with us today and the conversation that you stimulated, which I think is always a great sign of a good presentation.